One of the things that always gets brought up whenever the likes of J.K. Rowling, Graham Linehan, Gareth Roberts and others get called out for using their social media platforms to spread transphobia is this notion that people are entitled to their opinions, and if words upset you, then you're just too sensitive. In other words, transgender people should just suck it up. Of course, this ignores the fact that every time someone with influence abuses their platform to spread misinformed or in some cases downright hateful and bigoted opinions, it has real-world consequences, either by creating an even more hostile and unsafe environment for an already marginalised group to express themselves in, or more directly through legislation that causes harm and suffering not just for the trans community but for all of society. And what's happening in Texas right now is a scary case study of where the platforming of hatred ultimately leads. So for those who don't know, last week Texas State Governor Greg Abbott sent a letter to the Texas Department of Family and Protective Services urging them to investigate parents and agencies that provide trans-affirming care, or what he and his Attorney General Ken Paxton describe as sex change procedures, alleging that such care constitutes child abuse under criminal law. Now before we go any further, I want to immediately draw attention to that phrase, sex change procedures, because I'm aware there may be some people watching this in good faith who are skeptical about the idea of trans-affirming care. And one thing you've got to understand is that transphobes and other people acting in bad faith, like politicians, are very good at being deliberately misleading in order to make their point of view sound more reasonable. Council of Geeks already talked about this with how transphobes will often repeat the mantra that sex is real, despite the fact that no trans person is arguing with that statement, in order to construct a false narrative that transgender people are delusional and believe that sex isn't real, because you know it's always easier to argue with a straw man. Similarly, the phrase sex change procedures is deliberately chosen to sound scary and imply that trans-affirming care involves performing irreversible surgeries on young children. And sure, when you frame it like that, labelling it as child abuse starts to sound more reasonable. But here's the thing, generally speaking, transgender people aren't advocating for irreversible surgeries for kids. What gender-affirming care actually entails are things like puberty blockers and hormone therapy, treatments that have been directly linked to reduce suicide rates and depression among trans and non-binary youth, and which we know to be safe because we already use them to treat other conditions outside of caring for trans children. Transphobes love to talk about the supposed irreversible damage of transitioning, but you know what does cause irreversible damage? Going through the wrong puberty. Having listened to Jessie Gender's account of her dysphoria and the consequent trauma she experienced growing up as a result of not having access to gender-affirming care, a video that more people really need to see, I believe it's no exaggeration to say that treatments such as puberty blockers can quite literally save lives, which is why denying such treatments to trans kids and attempting to criminalise parents and organisations for providing the care that they need is so dangerous. Now, there has been some debate over whether this has any actual legal weight or ramifications, and you could very well argue that it's all just political posturing, but even if that is the case, it's still going to cause harm. As far as I can tell, this could go one of two ways. Either the DFPS will follow Abbott's directive and investigate cases of children receiving gender-affirming care, in which case they'll be scrutinising and potentially prosecuting parents just for being decent, responsible human beings and doing the right thing, in the process wasting valuable time and resources that could go into investigating cases of real child abuse, which goes back to what I said about how it's not just trans people who are hurt by bigotry, or the DFPS will do nothing, in which case the words of Greg Abbott and his Attorney General will still act as a rallying cry to transphobic and hateful far-right-wing groups, leading to a hostile culture of misinformation and fear-mongering, and an increased social stigma for both trans kids and their parents or guardians. And bear in mind that as part of Abbott's letter, he calls directly on the public to report parents of minors who are receiving gender-affirming care, even going as far as to suggest that not reporting such quote-unquote child abuse could result in criminal penalties, which is the most insidious part of all. As I alluded to at the beginning, words have power and words have consequences, and that's very much the case here. It deeply infuriates me that transphobes feel the need to weaponise children as part of their fear-mongering campaigns, but sadly it's nothing new. It all goes back to that point I made previously about how bigotry takes the same forms even as the target changes. The very same sort of rhetoric was being used at the height of the anti-gay movement, and ironically it was the children who ultimately suffered, just like how what's happening in Texas as well as in other states and indeed other parts of the world today is going to hurt children and is already hurting children. And that honestly breaks my heart. It's why I wanted to get this video out as soon as possible and use my voice as an ally to correct some of the misinformation and fear-mongering, in the hope that those who might be watching who are in any doubt will realise that trans-affirming care is not child abuse. Denying trans youth access to potentially life-saving treatment is child abuse. For those who want to learn more about this subject and how you can be an ally to the trans community and help with this situation, I'll leave some links in the description, and I urge you to check those out and spread word about this wherever you can. I'm Midnight, and I just lost my train of thought.